Good evening. I decided to do a video series of some evening walks since they say that one of the best ways to avoid social isolation while trying to social distance is to get outside and enjoy nature. But the problem with that is a lot of my family and some of my friends can't get out due to mobility issues, medical concerns, or just their job doesn't allow it. And so I thought, why not share what I get to see in the evenings with all of you, and then you can enjoy it with me. But we're going to start with just a short walk through my field, and you can see here daffodils coming up, and there's a bunch, as you can tell. You can kind of see the view in the background there through the field. The traffic you hear is interstate. In the springtime, once the leaves get on the trees, that's not quite so loud, but in the winter, it's pretty loud at times. You can see over here, this is one of our strange little bushes that comes up every year. We're not sure what it is or why it grows in the middle of the yard, but we don't mow it down. You can see kind of a deep reddish crimson leaves, but it's a pretty cool little plant once it comes out. And it'll get about 2 feet tall. You hear my dog Bruno barking in the background. He likes to protect us from birds and things that land in the yard. We have more daffodils over here. And these are different species. So if you notice, the ones from before had a lot of different petals. And these have the main ones growing out, more like a standard daffodil would look. And that continues down all through the field, really. Then we do have a few that are different colors coming out. This one is a white, kind of a pale butter yellow. It's really pretty though. And as we go on through the field, you'll see one of the features in the field next to our house is a huge rock. Once the field grows over, you won't be able to see this because the weeds will get too tall. But it's probably about 6 foot in length. And then again, more of the daffodils in clusters. And these are more of the variety like you see up in the front of the yard with the multi different leaves. Now in the summertime, this field behind us will grow up and the weeds get probably about waist high. But we like to mow different paths through it, and so I'll take you on one of the walking paths that we usually mow. You can kind of see remnants of where the path used to be. Right now it's really marshy and really wet down in there. But there's also, if you look down where we're actually walking, some really nice tiny little purple flowers coming up. A couple different varieties and species. You can see they're growing the border here. And they're itty bitty, not very big at all. You can see next to my hand about how small they really are. Then we have some different mosses and things growing up here. Those are pretty cool. I'm not sure if they'll turn into flowers or if that just stays a moss. But in the springtime here, there's always plenty of interesting things to find if you take the time to look. And I'm going to have to be careful navigating through here because, as I said, this is quite swampy. We're actually going to go around and through this way. Now you probably can't see it, but pretty much all of this is water. Anytime it rains, this whole bottom will get almost like a little creek. And here we have some remnants of last year's growth. These are actually what's called a devil's tomato, and it's like a wild tomato plant that grows. They are not edible. They are poisonous. It probably wouldn't kill you, but it probably would not feel well in your stomach. But the field gets full of those later in the year, usually in the fall. You can see a lot of briars and things that are starting to sprout up. Some of those will become blackberry bushes. Some of those will just be briars. And this field up here, all these plants coming up that you see right here over the fence line, they're all laying down now and just look like a bunch of dead plants. But they'll end up actually being a field of thistle. And there'll be hundreds of them in the later summer. And thistle is an interesting plant. It has spikes on it, so even though it looks soft to the touch, when you touch it, it will prick your skin. We have some, looks like a wild lettuce growing. Starting to come up through the grass. And those are actually all along the path here, you can see. And we have a small deer footprint. And those are also in the field a lot too. Of course, as you can imagine, being a field full of vegetation, the deer do enjoy coming back here, even in the winter. And just about every evening you'll find some. Here we've got a pretty cool little plant growing. It's kind of got sharp edges on it as well. Not one you would want to accidentally step on if you were barefoot. And up ahead, before we get there, we have one of our very first dandelions of the season. You can see it's just starting to sprout up through the ground. And dandelion is a very beneficial plant. A lot of people think it's a weed, but it has a lot of medicinal purposes, a lot of useful uses for it. And so before you mow it down, you might want to check that out a little bit. But we're coming up to where our peach tree is. And we did get peaches off of it for the first time last year. It had not bloomed before last year, at least while we lived here. But you can see it's quite full of buds. Each one of those will become a peach. And they're very good. You can see it's quite a large tree for a peach tree. And we also have a berry bush growing here, just now starting to sprout as well. And that will become blackberries in the spring. And so as we round off here, we're just about to the edge of our field, and where we'll turn in our walk and head back towards the house. And another interesting plant here, you can see some of the seed pods from last year that have not come off yet. And those seed pods will actually blow in the wind and produce more plants. And so those are actually growing along the fence line here. where they've pollinated. Then up ahead, we have an interesting tree. This big guy here. Last year, the very top of the tree was hit by lightning and came out. But as you can see, it's still standing, and it does have buds on it, so it will be a living tree this year, as will the one next to it. And we're very fortunate to have a neighbor next door that has a huge field that he keeps up very well. And it's quite a beautiful view, as you can see. I believe it's about 12 acres total. But as we start back towards the house, we're coming up on the magnolia tree, which right now does not have any buds on it. But it's still early in the year, so it may and should live. You can see it's not sprouted anything just yet. And so as we go on down through here, these are some of our berry bushes that will grow into blackberries in the spring. You can see they're just now starting to sprout little bits of green. And they are covered in briars, so you do have to be careful. But they produce some very nice blackberries later in the season. And you can see quite a nice view out through the field. And way out in the distance, probably can't see in the video, but on one of the far peaks is a water tower. And sometimes during the winter, you can actually see snowshoe out there. And so we'll just continue on. Some of our neighbors' pine trees, nice little thicket there. We call that the entrance to the twilight zone, just because it looks kind of neat the way it's laid out. But you can see all the trees are now starting to get the buds. And will be full of blooms very, very soon. Not sure what type that is. And if you listen, you may be able to hear some of the birds. They generally will wake you up in the morning if you're outside and fortunate enough to hear them. And then finally, this is our little berry section. And here we'll have blackberries and red raspberries. And the way you can tell the difference is the red raspberries have kind of this fuzzy little stuff going on. It's prickly, but it looks almost like it has hair. And all of those that have the reddish tint with the fuzzy look will become red berries. And then the ones that are just briars will become the blackberries.